Hi everyone and welcome to another video. Today I'm going to talk about my reading stats for 2021. I keep an extensive Excel about my reading. It's really not okay. You know, in Excel, so you have those columns and they have the letters. I might be using the whole of the alphabet to keep track of stuff. I just like Excel, can't help it. I like having all of these things available. Yes, it does take some time to fill it in, but hey, I'm liking it. Now, a lot of people have been using the Storygraph stats, but I've realized that they don't really say anything to me. Like the reading mood, for example. I mean, I don't know about you, but mine always says reflective. And I just don't know what that means. The things that I track, however, do speak to me. Let's dive into it. I've done a similar video last year, so now I'm also able to compare quite a lot of these things with my reading last year, and let's go. So let's start with the basics. Last year I read 92 books. That number to me is really just a number. I have no emotions attached to it. I don't think that people that read 30 or 10 read not enough. I don't think that people that read more are beasts. I just think that we all do what we do. 92. My reading has been growing for the past years. I think 5 years ago I was around 40 and it's been like growing steadily, except for last year that was an idiotic corona-induced 150. 92, happy with it. Could have been less, would still have been happy. Could have been more, would also still have been happy. I think the only thing I'm disappointed about is that it's not 93, because that is a more satisfying number because you can divide 9 by 3. That's really the only thing I have with that number. Now, a big part of my reading was Invisible Cities. I read 18 books, I believe, for Invisible Cities, and you see that throughout the stats what influence that has. So, one of the things that I'm always really happy to track is the amount of countries that I've read. So, as you can see, I have read books from 38 countries, and you can see which countries these are in the stats. I'm kind of disappointed. Well, this kind of shows me that I should really read one book from a Russian author each year, because it's a really big part of this map. 38 countries, so there's 16 new to me, which is really good. 38 is a huge number. I'm super happy with this. But I realized that last year was 41. So this year's less, but on the other hand, last year I read 150 and now it's 92, so that's okay. So you can see the 16 countries that are new to me. I've marked them in orange. So we've got Argentina, Libya, Madagascar, Barbados, Morocco, Mozambique, Egypt, Equatorial Guinea, Panama, Peru, Romania, Senegal, Iraq, Syria, United Arab Emirates, and Lebanon. Most of these, I mean, maybe 2 aren't, but most of these are from the Invisible Cities. And you see the countries that I've read more than one book from. I put the number besides the name of the country, and usually they're like 2 or 3. So most of the times there will just be 2 or 3 books, and the exceptions are the US with 21, Britain with 13, France with 11, and the Netherlands with 5. Last year, I believe I read a lot more Dutch books, so it feels 5 is really not that much. I am happy that France is growing. I still wish Britain and the US would be less. But anywho, I'm happy with how varied my reading has been. I love that the map is growing. That brings the amount of countries that I've read from to 58, which I'm happy about. Now, I also keep track of this with continents, because you can group things in wonderful ways when you use data. And so I put the pie chart for last year and of this year next to one another. And you can really see, this shows me even more how I'm reading more diversely. This makes me really happy, because you see that Oceania has grown, you see that the Middle East has grown, Africa, Asia, South America, all of these take up more space in my reading, and I'm loving that. Interestingly enough, you see that the amount of space North America takes up in my reading is still practically the same. So apparently those other countries, other continents have been eating away at the amount of books I read from Europe, which I find interesting. I had expected it to evenly eat at North America and Europe at the same time. So I find this very interesting. I really want to keep this up. I love reading from all of these other continents and cultures. So yeah, this makes me happy. Countries also lead to languages. That's another thing I keep track of. So these are the languages that books have originally been written in. There are 14 different languages that books were originally written in. I find this number very small. That books that were originally written in English are nearly 58%, is just the same as last year. I find this number huge. I wish there were more. I only read 21 translated books, which is surprising. And I mean, on the one hand, I do see Spanish. There's 6 books that I read that were originally written in Spanish, and that is because a lot of the countries in South America speak Spanish. So it is explainable in that way. And French, the amount of books that I've read that were originally written in French have also grown. Last year was only 13%, and now it's nearly 20, so I'm happy about that. I wanted to read more books that were originally written in French. The language that I'm most proud of, I think, will be Tamil. That is one of the languages spoken in India, and it's because I read Story of a Goat, which was originally written in Tamil, so that's a cool language. One of the other things that I'm happy about is that I also kind of look at the books that have been translated from languages that I could have originally read. Last year there were 18 of those, so there were, for example, the original would be written in French, but I somehow read it in Dutch for different types of reasons. I hated the number. I thought last year was huge, 18 was big, and this year it's only 5, and I think that 4 of those were from books that I had already owned, like from when I was a kid, and that's the reason I now have a translation. So I'm happy about this, and I want to keep this up. So that also brings us to the languages I read in. So I read in 4 different languages. To be honest, one is German, and I read 1 German book, but still, kind of proud about it. It's the little green thing that you can see. Now for the rest, you see that the amount of English that I read has slightly grown from 59 to 63. 63 is still a lot. It's nearly 2/3, but it is what it is. And then you see that Dutch and French have changed. So last year I read 25% in Dutch, and this year it's only 11. And I think that part of that is because I have been using the library less. Ever since the end of summer, I've known that I'm going to move, and somehow because of that, I've stopped using the library. I think maybe it's because I want to have less unread books on my shelves, and because I'm kind of afraid that I'm going to get this book from the library and not be able to return it, which is ridiculous. But that explains the smaller percentage of Dutch, and also because I've been wanting not to read books translated to Dutch when I could read it in French or in English if that's the original language, or French when the original language is a Latin language. I'm really happy that French has grown. That was one of the goals that I had last year. So in 2020 it was 15%, and now it's 25%, which is a quarter of my reading, and I'm really happy about that, and I'm planning on keeping it up, which should go okay because I've discovered an international bookshop in the Netherlands that can send me books that are in French, so I think that will be fine. Now let's look at the gender of the author. This is a difficult one to track, obviously, because people shouldn't have to feel that if they're not cisgender, that they should be open about that. Last year I read pretty much 50-50 male-female and 1 non-binary author. This year is literally 60% female and 37% male, 2 non-binary authors, I think that would be, so 2.2, and also 1 male transgender. I don't really know why I don't put that in male. Well, I do know. I think not because it's different than male, but because I want to be aware of that more. So yeah, that's gender. I used to also keep track of sexuality, but it felt awful to have to put people in boxes like that, so I stopped that one. I do still keep track of ethnicity. So last year I was still reading 68% white authors, and the rest would be mostly Asian or Black, but also a little bit of other ethnicities. And this year I'm happy to say that I've read more books from people of color. You see it grows all over the place. I've split up East Asian and West Asian. I think West Asian is the turquoise one in the 2021 pie chart. I'm happy about this. I had original very much stretch goal of reading 50% authors of color. And honestly, knowing that for the second half of the year I kind of let go of everything, I'm still really happy about it. I think it's because I'm more aware of this in general at the back of my mind. So I am really happy about this, but I still want to go further and further because reading diversely is important. I also keep track of genres. First, on a fiction-nonfiction level, last year it was 25% nonfiction and 75% fiction. This year there's a lot less nonfiction, probably because I've been reading more from my shelves in the latter half of the year, and I don't have a lot of nonfiction. I was looking also at my shelves now starting at the beginning of the year, and I think from the 40 books, maybe 2 or 3 are only nonfiction. So it's explanatory, but it is explained through that. Also, the nonfiction that I do have are really big books. I mean, they should count as 3 normally. I'm not mad at this. It could be more. I would like it to be more, but on the other hand, I think quality is more important. I have realized that I love really nonfiction that is really about a topic, and often social, political, historical things. I really love those, and I love them more than memoirs. Memoirs, I find them interesting, but not as much as the other types. So going forward, I think I will focus more on those types of nonfiction when I feel like delving into a topic again. This is genres in general. So there are a lot of genres, and one of the things that I haven't yet figured out how to do is how to give one book multiple genres. I mean, some things can be and historical fiction and a memoir, for example, but now I will always have to choose one. Now you can see differences. With last year, I've read a lot more historical fiction, and that is where you see that Invisible Cities has been playing a role, because oftentimes when I read something from another country, I like it to be historical fiction, because that's the way to learn about how a culture develops, oftentimes I feel, and I just love historical fiction. That's also a thing. So it's not a surprise that historical fiction has grown so much. You see that there's also less different types of genres. Last year I read also plays and poetry, or maybe it's just that I've been tracking them differently. That's also possible. But there are less types of genres. And you also see that I read a lot less classics. Last year it was, let me see where they are. Well, it were 10 books, and it was nearly 7%, and this year I only read 2 classics, at least 2 books that I've marked as classics, and it doesn't even show as something that I read more than 3% from, so that really says something. Obviously, you should take into account that this year it's 92 books, and last year it was 150, but still 2 versus 10, significant. Same for magic realism. I love magic realism. I think it's one of my favorite genres. I only read 3 books that are magic realism this year. Very surprising. And last year it was 12. So that might be something that I think about a little bit more looking forward, because I do love that genre. You see that literary fiction has grown a little bit. You see that contemporary fiction is approximately the same from what I can see right now. Yeah, nearly 10 in both. And fantasy is approximately the same. I think those are my bigger genres. Another thing that I keep track of, like I said, I keep track of a lot of things, is the format in which I read it. So this year it's nearly 60% books, 9% ebooks, and 33% audio. Not a big surprise. I read a lot of audio through Scribd, and I noticed that I just pick up books really quickly on audio. I've always got one on the go. I mean, honestly, there's times that the only reason I do some grocery shopping or some cooking, or that I do the laundry, is because then I can listen to my audiobook. So this is not a surprise. Ebooks are mostly books that I still read through Scribd, so that I could access as an ebook. So there will probably be Invisible Cities books that I wanted to read but could only get through ebook through Scribd. There might have only been one that I read actually on my e-reader. And 60% books, nearly, not a big surprise either. The right pie chart is whether I own a book or not. So I own 41%, pretty nice. There are 40 that I don't own, so those are all of the audio and the ebooks. Well, not all, because I also keep track of the ones that I want, so that I read through ebook or audio and that I love so much that I want them on my shelves. I love having the books on my shelves so that I have that memory. It makes me happy to look at my shelves. So those are nearly 8%. There are 7% of books that I liked but then didn't like enough, and I put the book away. And I think the orange sliver is books that I have already got, so that I wanted to get and then bought. Happy about this also. I like that I don't own everything. Then here you see the pie charts showing on the one hand in what format I own it or not, or how I got to it and when I got it. So as you can see, 30% are books that I actually bought myself. I'm quite happy about that. If you know that 42% are books that I read in physical form, then knowing that 3/4 of that are books that I bought, quite nice. It means that I've been reading my own books semi-consistently. So this is good. Script, audio, and ebook are all obviously going to be the same numbers as the audio and ebook that you saw on the other pie chart. 11% are books that I got from the library. Not huge. I think I would want it to be a little bit more. I borrowed one book. Now I have to be honest, that book that I borrowed was my boyfriend's, so maybe it is kind of something that I do also kind of own. Still, I'm putting it in there as borrowed. 6.5% are books that I owned previous to becoming a student, so I've got them for more than 10 years. And then we've got books that I adopted, so those would be either books that I got from someone that was letting go of them or that I got from a free library. Nearly 9%, nice. And 3.3% are books that were gifted to me. Not that much. People that are close to me don't usually gift me books. I think they don't understand me. No, I think they're just afraid of giving me something that they don't really know if I'm gonna like it or not. Although I've seriously given them a list of things that I would want. So yeah, that's where I got a book from. And then we've got when I got it from. So NO means not owned, maybe 45%, obviously all these script things. 30% are books that I got in 2021. Quite happy about that. 15% in 2020. 2% in 2029. I suppose that means that 2028 will be the little orange thing. I think that will just probably be one book. And 7% are books that I had previous to 2029, so when I became a student. I'm happy that it means that I read books that as they come on my shelves, but I still have books that I've owned previous to just last year. And I wish those were bigger. This is also one of the reasons that for this quarter I'm also focusing a little bit more on books that I got previous to 2021, because they're still maybe 20. And if this year I'm going to read again books as they come on my shelves, that means that books from 2022 will be approximately a third, which means that books from 2021 will be smaller than that, maybe only 15%. So if I don't tackle the ones from 2022 and earlier, honestly, it means I will never get to them. So that's why I'm focusing on that a little bit more. Maybe at the second half of the year, I will focus more on books that I got on 2021. Also love keeping track of this. Also, it shows how my spending has changed, because 2 years ago I was still a student, so I had little to no money to buy books. And now that is not the case. Now my collection has been growing, and I've loved that, obviously. We're going to move at the end of February, and I've kind of decided that I'm not allowed to get books until we move, but then when we do move, I'm allowed to get a whole other bookcase, which I'm very excited about. Don't know how the boyfriend feels about it, but he's gonna have to live with it. So that's Ownage. Last thing is when I read things. So this is one that I kind of took away also from the Storygraph experience. So I keep track of when in the month I finished a book. You see my reading slump in August and September, not a big surprise. And for the rest, I would say it's kind of constant. March and December are kind of big. I'm surprised that March is one, because that's when I started a new job. But I think that in that month also I spent a lot of time, because I went there more regularly than in the other month. I was probably reading a lot in the train, and now sometimes in the train I have sleep or also do some work, and I wasn't doing that yet at that moment. But interestingly enough, that's also the month that I kept track of how much I was reading. I've got a video about that I'll link up in the cards, and I think it showed that I read about 2 hours a day. So if you look at the other months, it will probably be half that, at least in the slower months. December was also quite a lot, which makes sense. October, November, December I did a lot less sports, which is shown by them being more. I am also, from now on, going to keep track of pages, because I want to read more bigger books, or at least have them be a bigger part of my stats. So we'll see what that does to these numbers for next year. Other small things that I do also want to share, but not necessarily with a pie chart, is that I do still keep track of how much of the authors I live are alive, and this year there are 87, so that's quite a lot. So 13 are dead. You don't really have a in-between category. I've also been reading for different types of projects, so Invisible Cities is more than 20% of my reading. I also reread 4 books, so that's a little over 4%. And there were 2 that I read as part of my Reading Narnia project. I've also been reading books with other people, so as part of buddy reads or book clubs or stuff like that. In total, those are 21 books, and I've read books as part of Invisible Cities, only 5 with my regular book club. Really not that much, knowing that we read 1 book a month. 2 were favorites, and I love my book club very, very dearly. 1 is a book club that I set up with cycling friends. I also joined once a book club that was French speaking. I joined just for once also an online Instagram book club with some Dutch booktuber. There were 2 kind of read-alongs with bigger groups, and in total I think 5 or 6 books that I read just with 1 other person. I really like buddy reads. I plan on keep doing this. I still, even though I'm going to move, plan on participating in my book club in Delft. And as long as online is still very much a thing, I'll also still be joining my book club with the cycling friends, and I just love sharing reads. I plan also on having 1 book at least that I read with my mother next year. I tried 1, but I proposed this French classic and in the end she wasn't interested. So yeah, that's buddy reads. Obviously I highly recommend you doing buddy reads, and I'm going to have to push my Invisible Cities buddy reads a little bit more because I love those, obviously. So these were my stats. I love making this video. I love keeping track of all these things. It's quite a lot of work, I will say, not just keeping track of all the things, but then making sure that my pie charts work correctly. I love doing it. I love nosing in Excel. Are there any tidbits that you thought were interesting? Or are there any tidbits that you thought, I really don't care about this, why are you keeping track of this, you weird person? Would love to hear. Are there any tidbits about your reading that you would like to share? Always up for that. I'll see you guys in another video. By the way, in a couple of weeks I will do a similar, well, not the same amount of stats, but a stats video for Invisible Cities that I'm really looking forward to. I'm hoping people are still filling in the questionnaire, and I will also do a video that I also did last year where I try to name the books that I read this year. Very curious how that will go as well. I'll see you guys in another video. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Ba-chum, ba-chum, chum.